Okay, all right. Welcome to, I think this is my 80th show, folks. That's a kind of a road mark of some kind. Anyway, it's Wednesday the 19th today? Is it, we are the 20th. Oh my gosh, all right. We're almost to the summer solstice here. Woodstock TV, live. And this evening, I'm really pleased to have a lovely guest here, a bird of a feather in terms of activism for the good fight, so to speak. Ken Churchill, yeah?
Hi, George. Hello, everybody.
And so we have a kind of a little video clip here with Randy Steele and Jay Wank, and then a little further on we'll see Ken. I guess this is 2013, and let's just roll that, and that'll sort of set the tone for our conversation here.
Somebody fixed up the studio very nicely. Well, it was some years ago, and I know that equipment wears out. That I know, but
I'd also say looks could be deceiving.
well, how is it falling apart?
Okay.
As Joe was saying.
Well, there's the entire issue with the automation system, which maybe is in the process of being fixed. We just got our third camera back after being about a year and a half without the camera. So we do have cameras. The problem with this station is that Marketech, what they basically did in order to conserve money for the station is that the equipment that's in those two racks that we're supposed to produce with, they're dumpster dive equipment. Especially the DVDs. The DVDs have been, no, and absolutely not. Because you've got a bunch of amateur machines in there, meant for home use, that only work off the remote control. Well, if you're in a TV studio, you have to be working with multiple machines, and then you have to be working with multiple controls.
Okay, so
there are machines
that they put in
is not up to snuff for live production. Right. Now, there are DVD players out there now. Of course, everything's moving on in technology, and everything's becoming more strictly into the computer. Yeah. So we don't know how long the pieces of equipment are going to be available that we could actually use. But for $170 on the consumer market, you can get a professional out-of-the-box machine that does VHS as good as any VHS playback I've ever seen. Absolutely phenomenal DVD production. And if we just had 4 of those, 2 recorded, 2 for playback, that would be a big help.
Would you guys please get together and make a list, put it down on paper of what we need, and fix everything up, and if you can get prices on it, fine. If you can't, still give us a list rather than specifics. I'm looking over there because I don't want Bill to pop out. I have a question for you.
Okay. Well, you can. I get the idea.
Okay, do that and get it to us. You don't have to wait for the next meeting. Good. And then we'll know what's important.
Mental effort into it. What's your name again, sir? Jeremy. Thank
He's
you
the
so
town
much.
supervisor.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, and Paul has been so supportive.
And Jeremy, thank you for what you said. That was really compassionate.
Jeremy, we need a social experiment to try to bring it to the world and see if the world could treat host people with just a great deal more humanity. It's basically we're euthanizing.
I have a proposal.
I
have a proposal, Jeremy. If Dan Coughlin, who is the executive director of Manhattan Neighborhood Network, would be in agreement, because he came on the show with Ugly George, who started public access or got it popular. If we have Dan Coughlin and you and Ken on a TV show in Manhattan, would you come? If Dan Coughlin.
Do I have to drive to Manhattan?
Yeah.
I'll drive you, Jeremy. I'll drive you. Then they'll buy you lunch.
And a person of your similar stature, Dan Coughlin.
That's a tentative yes.
If Dan Coughlin, you know, if he's in agreement, because if he came on a show with me and Ugly George, you know, Ken has worked with experts in homelessness for decades. I learned a lot from you, Ken. A lot.
Jeremy, national policy with respect to homelessness is passive euthanasia. We're euthanizing our homeless men. And we're doing it in Woodstock here, you know, no more than anywhere else. And you're probably more supportive here than in other places. But we're euthanizing our homeless men and women. They're dying. I'm VP of Street Leads in New York City. I personally witnessed with these eyes the euthanasia of 150,000 men and women from the sidewalks of New York City. They're gone. They're dead. They could be walking and talking, and they could have a pulse, and they could still be human beings. We're getting rid of them, you know. And I just believe that, you know, a society that claims to be great is doing the wrong thing, and society is empowered to do better than this than we are. And I just, you know, when you called my name back up, and I knew that maybe this had a heartbeat in the town, or it's got a pulse now, because the people from the community came in and spoke up for it. And I only found out recently that would be, I've been alone for so long. Paul and Joe helped me, and some other people have helped me. I'm so used to carrying this out. I need as many people to help homeless people as we can find. Actually, if we create small homeless land reservations adjacent to the municipalities, in 50 years they could become a hamlet or a village, or evolve into a viable economic.
Yeah, like America investing in itself.
We need to start somewhere to find out. I'm sorry, Paula.
America investing in itself.
Yeah, well, it started with pioneer towns and villages and went across the country. I'm saying we can do it again, but depopulate the cities in a logical way, because the cities are basically, the country's overpopulated, the city's overpopulated. We have more and more children every day, and we're euthanizing our homeless people. And that's our method of continuing our society. You know, kill men and women, get rid of them.
What is your name again?
Okay, that was really kind of hard to decipher, you know, the real conversation with the background conversation. So I'm sorry about that, folks, but you know, that's the nature of live recording. So I was able to really kind of take in your passion and insight into the homeless situation. And you know, I've been kind of looking at some footage coming out of California, and along this one particular stretch of highway, there's thousands of tents. Literally, this one YouTube clip was just unbelievable. This man at the GoPro camera on his helmet just took a little bike ride, and it was astonishing. And you know, you think of this as a California problem or maybe a Florida problem, but you know, shortly after I saw that YouTube clip, I was coming back from Kingston, and at the we're at Washington Street and Thruway Interchange Circle there, I've noticed the tents off in the wood line, yeah, right there right in there in Kingston proper. And I don't, you know, I haven't heard actually anybody utter the homelessness word or tent city word in Woodstock until I have literally met you and saw this clip today.
Right. You know, by coincidence only, I saw the same film. I posted it on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
You know, the guy's riding a bicycle, and you know, it looks like, I don't want to sound derogatory, but it looks like a third world nation. It doesn't look like California in the video, but yet it's California.
Yeah.
And I liked what you said about the homeless situation, because I don't like calling it the homeless problem, because that puts a context of responsibility on homeless people, that they're a problem. And I don't see them as a problem. I see them as displaced human beings that are suffering and destined to die prematurely. To be honest with you, they struggle and they suffer every day to live another day of life. Yet, if we see them on the streets and homeless, in there is a will to live, and I know that homeless people exist on the land. It's so obvious. You've seen it on video. You've gone through an intersection. You've seen tents, on the right side of the road or the left side of the road, and it's an example of what we could find all over the country. The homeless people are in the woods and in hiding all over this country. They're in the woods all over New York, and they're in the woods all over Florida. Even the police admit it at town board meetings down there that I attend. They admit it. That everywhere you look, there are homeless people in encampments, in tents. And my belief for the last 30 years has been, if homeless people exist on the land anyway, and they do, they don't exist for the most part in shelters. They exist on the land. And when they get the boot out of the shelter, 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock, whenever they're asked to leave, shelters across the United States, they're existing on the land, whether it's 2 degrees or 110 degrees. They're, again, existing on the land. So I'm saying if they do exist on the land, then it's the responsibility of society to organize that basic fact of life. And I think we're just beginning as a country to understand that we have to do something for our displaced people. And my opinion is we don't need more shelters, although the shelters that are already built are part of how homeless people stay alive, and they should be there until something better comes into their lives. And I'm happy to say that in 4 cities in America, and I've fought for a long, long time to bring to the attention of the people of my country that we have to use our land to help our people. And I started so long ago. I got laughed at, I got ridiculed, you name it. But sadly, I was not believed until my book, American Homeless Land Model, was discussed on Curtis and Kubi, the #1 radio show in America. And I think it was in the late 90s, but I'm not sure. I'd have to research to find out. I believe it was the late 90s. My book was discussed twice. It's called American Homeless Land Model, saying that we have to use our land to help our people. Ron Kubi, one of the leading civil rights attorneys in the country, was in favor of the concept, and he said, listen to this man, meaning the author, which was myself then and still is, the author of that book. And we need to re-homestead our people. We are basically ripping the taxpayer off right now to fund a failed American shelter system, which provides no real opportunity or any degree of self-reliance to homeless people.
Well, if I can jump in for a moment, I mean, you've really touched on a whole hornet's nest of ideas here and experiences in my life, and that is the things change over time. Like we're watching Woodstock now kind of morph as a lot of the old guard are passing away, and we opened our show tonight with a clip of Jay Wank and Jeremy Wilbur, who are now both gone, and new blood has to come in and fill those shoes and this kind of thing. So there's I'm seeing the streets getting torn up and work being done, and there's it's a real change in the vibe of the town, and the thing is that what I noticed in the 1980s is I did a lot of traveling through New York State from northwest corner of Connecticut out to Buffalo region of New York, where I was staying with some Seneca people there at Cattaraugus, and then up to this place called Akwesasne, which is the Mohawk Reserve along the St. Lawrence River, and then back down. So I was always like various highways, and Route 17 they call the southern tier of New York. In the 1980s, there was every couple hundred miles, because it's about a 500-mile ride, or 100 miles, I had a little place to stop, and I could get a burger and talk to the locals. And within that decade, by the time I was at the end of that part of my life and journey of my life, there was grass growing out of the expansion cracks of Route 17. In Fish's Eddy, New York, where I used to get my sandwich or burger on the way out west or on the way back east, was closed. And I started talking to people. I said, "What's going on here?" I said, "Well, everybody's moving out there because the demand for paper was less and less because of the increasing use of computers, and the demand for new building because of the stagnation in the economy. The mainstay for the employment for a lot of people in that stretch of New York was logging, gone. So this dimension of population left looking for work. Among other factors. And then in Rochester, IBM, and in Syracuse as well, IBM downsized, moved to other countries, whatever, as things are going on. And there, Corning Glass downsized, and a few other things. And so your industrial and tech base had shifted away from the region, and now you find homes, well, not now, because now I'm going back to early 2000s. I was driving through the Syracuse area, and here are all these IBM-built homes. Split ranch, split-level ranch homes. They're very kind of suburban, whatever. They're going for taxes. They're going for $1. I mean, there was so much housing that was now abandoned, and then in the city proper, and this is going back to 2010, I would say as much as a third to a half of the city of Syracuse was empty shops, empty stores, empty factories. And what I'm alluding to here is that there is all of this infrastructure that had been built, and now it's moldering into the ground. And when we think of ghost towns, we think of 1800s. This old building that's just these little towns that are just sort of dilapidated and falling apart, and nobody's there. It doesn't work like that. These towns are decaying before our eyes, and it happens rather quickly. And so what I'm kind of hedging towards in my idea here is that homelessness is almost a situation that is a result of, as you said, a failed economic model. And I'm a builder, and I'm creative, and I'm looking at like these old factories in Syracuse, old brick and mortar furniture factories and stuff. They're all gone. They're still standing, but they're empty. They're not doing anything anymore. And I'm looking, antique brick. What a resource. I see resource and possibility and potential in these situations that a local population could muster their energy and take some of this stuff apart and build something new out of it. But there's no will, because there's no economy to sustain the people as it is. So that's one thing that I saw going on in my life. And then another element that I encountered was the state of Maine. And you brought up, this really impacted me in a big way, and that is in the state of Maine. And I'm going back to the middle 1990s when I learned this, because I had access to Governor King, Angus King, for another unrelated reason. But what I found out is that there is a whole population of undocumented Native Americans, not Native Americans in the sense of the before Columbus Native Americans. I mean, our native, post-colonial population. Many of them are born out in the woods, no birth certificates. Many of them are in towns that aren't even registered with anything. There is a whole cross-section of population in the state of Maine that the state of Maine was now trying to corral. They wanted to get all of these people stamped and documented as citizens or whatever. But the thing is that I encountered this same scenario in the Adirondacks in the 1970s. I was out fishing in a remote area, and your classic kind of Hollywood movie depiction of hillbillies come out and start socializing with me. And we end up having coffee and beans and stuff by a campfire with the fish we just caught, talking about stuff and whatever. And I got brought into their world, where they tap electricity from the power lines, and they have a single light bulb dangling in an abandoned house out in the woods that you can't see from the road, and this kind of thing. And in retrospect today, in my comfortable life such as it is, I think about these people, and it's almost like a dream. Did they even really exist? Did I really experience that? And this is real, folks. Just like the tents popping up around the traffic circle in Kingston. So let me leave you with that.
I just read a really good book on social causation, and it was written in 1935, and it opened my eyes that if we talk about homelessness, and there are so many other social problems that we have, they don't normally have one cause. And if you consider cause and effect, and look at what is the cause of the effect, let's say homelessness. What is the cause of homelessness? We know what the effect is. People don't have a home. But what about the cause? What caused it? And sometimes there is a cause before that cause, if you find it. Then there's a cause before that cause, and a cause before that cause. So if we see people without a home in America, we should consider history as cause. And the Industrial Revolution, for me, ended recently. Within the last 20 years, it's over. We have a Rust Belt in the United States now, which is, we know it's a result of a dying industrial situation, and certainly the revolutionary part of the Industrial Revolution has ended, clearly. And what do we mean by the revolutionary part of the Industrial Revolution? In 34, in Europe, England passed the enclosure enactments. I talk about it often, but it's so vital to understand why we have people without a home today. And though the enclosure enactments said people existed on the common laws before the land was enclosed by government or the king or whoever the heck was doing it. And the Industrial Revolution was coming, but there were no laborers in the large towns or cities at the time. So the technology for an Industrial Revolution was with us. We had that in Europe, but we didn't have labor. So they passed the enclosure enactments, forced the people off the common lands into the cities of Europe to provide cheap labor for industry. So that's the initial cause. So now, some 300 years later, when industry falls dead on its nose in America, we have displaced American people everywhere, from industrial manufacturing that's closed down. Industrial cities like Detroit have closed up almost entirely, at least when compared to what they formerly were. And all over the nation and now, at the same time, another cause would be globalization, where American jobs are sent elsewhere for even cheaper labor. So we have, at the same time, greedy landlords demanding rents that people cannot pay because they don't have the jobs, and they little by little find themselves homeless, and very often families. 1/3 of the American population, homeless population, are alcohol and drug addicted, 1/3 are mentally ill, and approximately 1/3 are homeless American families. But the American families, they are considered a little more than the individuals, and because they have children. And very often they are permitted housing in welfare hotel systems where Joe and Paul did a show on it where it costs about $3,000 a month to house a family, $3,500 a month to house a family in a slum hotel. And the taxpayer is being ripped off of that. And I'm saying what we need to do is re-homestead those people on land that they own and redistribute some land in America. It's time. Clarence Darrow said in 1903, one of the main causes of poverty is the unequal distribution of land. And if we consider how unequal the distribution of land is in America, it's not hard to understand why we have a large homeless population. There is no lawful place for them to be. The federal government alone in the United States owns and controls 650 million acres of land that it considers to be its own, owned by the government, and human habitation is not permitted. That doesn't count the land owned by the states and held in reserve. There's like 650,000 acres right just off of Woodstock owned by the state here that no one's really allowed to survive on. You know, that just as an example of how regions upon regions upon regions upon land is controlled by the government, and they forbid people to erect shelter for the purpose of survival. And I'm saying there's plenty of land to do it with. It's the government won't let homeless people do it. The government won't let homeless families be re-homesteaded on land. The government won't permit 200,000 to 300,000 homeless American veterans that wander our country. It doesn't give them land. It doesn't permit them to be on the land to re-homestead themselves, to put up a tent that becomes a shack. It becomes a shack, which becomes a small building, and a small building, which becomes a better building. And you come back 40 years later, and there's a skyscraper sitting there. That's what economic development does. That's what evolutions of small towns into larger towns does. Our country began with tents and lean-tos and things that became cities. And that's what we have to do again with our homeless population. We have to permit the people land. We have to redistribute land back to the people. Can I go on roll for a second?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So when I started 30 years ago, it seemed like an impossible job because I needed a job. You know, I got hurt. I lost my trade, and I needed a job because I think everyone in society should contribute something to the society that they live in. And homeless people spending all day with idle time is not giving them mental health either. You know, they need a homeless community to be productive in and gain self-reliance to the degree that they can gain self-reliance based on their addiction or based on, you know, they can't compete in the marketplace as fully people with full human capacity. There's something wrong there to begin with, you know? And they were the ones that were booted out of our economic system first. But yet they aren't allowed to form a community and help each other survive. They're not permitted that. They're dispersed. And if they're forced into a shelter, they're forced into a shelter that is engineered so that the poor will never own a thing. In a shelter, a poor person will never own a light bulb. They will never own the front door. They will never own the linoleum that they stand on. It's engineered so they won't own anything, and their offspring will never own a thing. And that's a cycle of poverty that has to be broken. And the only way to break it, as I can see, is to redistribute land. So if we create, I came up with an idea to create one home. I followed American homeless basically. I was at the Shinnecock Indian Reservation on Long Island, and I was standing by the drum, and I looked at the field, and I'm in this wonderful spiritual experience with these Indians, and I looked at the land, and I said, you know something? That's what American homeless people need. They need land. Because I don't care what you say about how difficult and degrading life can be on an Indian reservation. Native Americans are not trespassers. They have a lawful place to be. And there's a great deal of hope for improvements to be made based on the fact that it belongs to them, however small it might be. And that's where the epiphany came from for American homeless. I understand we don't have a building problem. There's buildings all over the place. So why we have homeless people? Because homeless people have lost the rights to tenancy. A homeless man has lost his right to land. A homeless woman has lost her right to land. They do not exist in tenancy. And I'm saying in American homeless, we have to create tenancy for our homeless people. By that, I came up with the idea of one homeless land reservation for each county of the United States, whereby a homeless family could cross the American grid in search of economic opportunity. We're meaning that if they lived in a Rust Belt in Detroit and there was work in Richmond, Virginia, a homeless family that doesn't have the money for a motel could travel county to county doing day work, and hopefully they have a car left, and stay on the reservation. The school bus would come by, pick up the kids, and put them into that local school system. And when they had enough money, they would move to the next county in a direct line with where they believe the work would be. So it'd be a system where we can put the money put the people, the homeless people, where the opportunity is. And there's plenty of them that work and still can't pay their selfish, greedy landlord. Do you have a question, George?
Well, you're bringing up something that I've studied intensely, and that is, the one of the interesting facts of the modern Native American is that conquest happened on this continent. No doubt about it. Conquest happened, but it wasn't a complete win for the conquistadors, shall we say, for the colonial law, for the colonial rule. As much as 25% of North America is still in the possession and control of Native people.
That much, huh?
Yeah, that much. In some places, it's vast regions of territory is still in the control of Native communities, and that model of survival, being a cultural and spiritual link to the land, which is a universal right and structure, whether it's Celtic or Gaelic, if you will, or African, or any people have an indigenous home, spiritual home or earth connection home. And now, at this particular kind of time in our world, we are looking at a world culture, because so much of it has because of the ability of the industrial revolution to bring on advanced technology for transportation and so on. Human beings have mixed up the pot all over the world, not just in the United States or Great Britain or other great colonial powers. And my experience learning from my native friends is there was a very real civilization here prior to Columbus, and that civilization was one that has a long historical memory of itself and its connection to the land and its history, and certain principles, if adhered to, will give you a long, successful culture. And that is respecting your environment, take what you need, return what you don't need, sharing. Sharing is huge in Native communities. The hunter goes out and he was particularly successful, and his brother goes out and wasn't so successful, but both families got to eat, so they shared, so there are effective models that we can look at right here, right now. Solutions are here right now, and on many of these reservations, they live in houses, they have jobs. The Mohawk and other New York State Native communities have sent their young men into the cities to build our skyscrapers. Iron workers are famous. All the bridges and superstructures and skyrise, the Empire State Building. There were Mohawk men building those, structures all through the late 19th and throughout the 20th century. So the cultures have a lot that have contributed to each other in good and bad. But the most positive, highest knowledge is that we have, the word nation comes from the word natal. It is your natal connection to the land, to the mother, to Earth Mother, that brings us to a nation. So if you're the Mohawk Nation or the Seneca Nation or the Hopi Nation, that it is your natal connection to the land upon which you have lived for thousands of years. And one elder said to me once, well, George, you're half Irish, and on your mom's side you're Irish, and on your dad's side you got a little bit of Native American and Welsh and Mongol and Nordic stuff going on there in your bloodline, but do your ancestors sleep in the ground here? And I said, well, yeah, they do. Quite a few of them, actually, going back 13 generations. He says, well, if your ancestors, if your relations are sleeping in the ground, then you're native too. And that's part of how, we're breathing the air here, we're drinking the water here. The molecules of those ancient people are in our food. Whether we, even physically, as well as the spiritual aspect of that. So we absorbed this, and there were these ideas, some people can call it teachings or prophecy or whatever, that in our generation, there would be young people who would reject the machine and throw their energy and interests into the more native, natural way of life. Because it's a complete way of life as well as a political system. And that's where, the answers that you and I are both looking for are really here in front of us.
Right.
And it is
That's what, the thesis of my book was,
please.
The law forbids the common lands as a place of abode for the accruement of resources and the protection of life and property. That's the thesis of American Homeless. And
Could you say that again a little slower, please?
Sure. The law forbids the common lands as a place of abode for the accruement of resources and the protection of life and property. Accruement of resources simply means none of us accumulated all our resources all in one day. It takes time to, a homeless person first, they might get a toothbrush. A week later, they might have a face cloth. It takes time, but they're not permitted to accrue their resources. There's no place to put them. The government confiscates their accruement, and they have to start again and start again and start again with nothing and start again with nothing and on and on and on. What I like your explanation of the Native Americans' natal connection to the land.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. And I can speak through this language very easily. That's the connection American homeless people need to the land. That's the answer. The way it's proved to work for Native Americans, it will work for American homeless people. It will work. Now, 4 cities in the United States, I'm very happy to say this, people, and it would be my main desire to be on your show, George, today, is to say that 4 cities have created city-sanctioned homeless encampments for the first time in American history. It begins in Dignity Village, year 2000, and I'm kind of hoping that American Homeless, my book, discussed by Ron Kuby, nationally, I would like to think, or hope at least, it was a contribution to the new concept by city managers that we face the inevitable task to organize our people on land. And homeless people exist on the land. If you don't see them flying by in the sky, they're on the land.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They don't exist anywhere else. So that's our answer, the land. That's what it is. So we need a natal, right? Connection to the land for American homeless people. They have been displaced by the end of the Industrial Revolution. They have been displaced by sheer numbers of population. More people exist than vacancies exist habitable vacancies exist to house the people. It's a short way through this. There are, let's say in America, sometimes there's only one major city in a state. Sometimes there are two. Very seldom are there more than two major cities in a state, any one of the states. In New York, it would be New York City and Albany, right? Show me another one that big. Boston. Okay. No, that's in another state.
Another state.
Excuse me, it's another state.
Yeah, you're right.
So you look at each state and you say, well, that city or two is the economic engine of that entire state. So that economic stability of that city spreads out to the borders of that state in terms of economic exchange. So in other words, if that city didn't exist, probably there would be no economy in the state, So it's the engine, the economic engine. So what I'm saying is, due to overpopulation, which we never talk about much, due to overpopulation, we're asking 50 states with 2 cities to economically support 320 million people, right? And I'm saying that's out of balance. That is absolutely and definitely out of balance. Because when you force all the people into the cities and off the land, and you pump the whole populations into the cities and very little out on land, that drastically increases the value of the land under high-rise buildings. It reaches unrealistic land value, right? And as we build skyscrapers upward and house people, the landlord then is in a position to overcharge for rents and mortgages. I consider banks landlords.
Well, sure.
And so in other words, that's the reason why there is an imbalance, because the banks own all the land under all the buildings with few exceptions. So that land's enclosed. Mom and pop aren't going to settle on that land, really. The banks own it, And the church owns large regions of land and keeps people out. And the states and cities and towns and villages and the federal government, they don't want people on the land. That's very, very obvious. They want full control of the land. They don't want people on there. They don't want you throwing up that tent until more recently. And labor was the engine for the Industrial Revolution. Labor, pure labor. So they forced the people into the cities to do the labor. Well, it's time to create new towns between old towns. It's time to create new small cities in between small cities. It's time to create new large cities between existing large cities. It's time to redistribute our population so that as a counterbalance to the selfish, greedy demands of inner city landlord thieves. And that's what we have to do. Where do we start? We start with homeless people. We re-homestead them. Where do we start? We start with American veterans that are coming out of the Army, and some of them become homeless immediately because they lost their support system. So I'm calling for a second GI Bill whereby American veterans, when they come out of the Army, will get a choice between education, some money, or a half-acre of land. And if he chooses a half-acre land, we create little vet towns that become bigger towns, which become cities, in between cities. And after the vets succeed, due to their recollection of cooperation with each other and discipline, and even though they're homeless, they're acquainted more with some good habits, So let's say we start with them. But 4 American cities have created city-sanctioned homeless encampments. It was first in Dignity Village, Portland, Oregon. And if you Google Dignity, if you go on YouTube and search Dignity Village, Portland, Oregon, you'll see the film Dignity Village. It's a homeless community on land in tiny houses that existed since the year 2000. The second one was in Las Cruces, New Mexico, as reported in the New York Times, and it has 50 people on land, and the city changed its ordinance which forbid people to have a homeless encampment. And those good people, and these are good people under a good mayor. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the third was, the third city was Seattle, Washington, under a great mayor, created 2 city-sanctioned homeless encampments where homeless people exist lawfully on land. And the third was on Big Island, Hawaii, and I was privileged to get a phone call from the office of Mayor Kim, and I was consultant one year for the building of Camp Tikaha on Big Island in Hawaii. And that would have been the fourth. And that was a pilot program, and because the pilot succeeded in Kona, Kailua Kona, Hawaii, on the west side of Big Island, it succeeded for a year. So the state legislature passed a bill in Hawaii for $50 million for the building of Hawaii statewide safe zones where homeless families and homeless individuals can exist on land without being criminal trespassers. So history is being made in the state of Hawaii now, and I'm so proud to say that it's happening, people. It's happening, and I wish we could build one right here in Woodstock, but you know.
Talk more to George or the camera.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Talk about Jeremy when you talk about
Well, yeah, I really have to sort of regroup myself a little bit, because you've again, you've really touched on a lot of really wonderful things here. You can't really call those people homeless anymore, so they should really change the vibe of what we call that.
Right.
What you have actually is a successful program of
Homeless community. I agree with you.
of community.
Yeah.
Of community.
Yeah, reach the level of community.
It's reached the level of community, and community is a model that works, and you contribute to your community. Now, the more sinister side of this, and I hate to go into sinister thoughts here, but the more sinister side is that some of this collective failure that we have going on, that, as you say, and I never thought of it, of the real long roots that go back into history that have brought us to where we are now in terms of creating this situation. The best way I like to describe it as well, it's the landed gentry, scraping the peasants off the land again, or the conquistadors, scraping the native communities off the land. There's this quality of gross manipulation of the human condition, and it's by design, by the designers of such, cultural phenomena, the designers of culture, the designers of technology, the designers of government, the designers of the law. There are architects to all of these scenarios. And one of the things that I've been studying is the atmosphere and geoengineering, and the microwave technology, and now this advent of the 5G rollout, which includes these millimeter waves penetrating into our actual nervous system of our brains, and so many things that need to be understood about that issue alone. But in the geoengineering department, we look up virtually almost every day, and there's big long white lines in the sky that are not your common contrail as we've been taught since we were little. Oh, that's a jet aircraft, that's a contrail, that's ice crystals forming from the spent fuel as the jet goes overhead at 30,000 plus feet. Different thing going on now, and a lot of what you're bringing up and talking about is by design. The creation of these big cities and having an economic engine that is expected. New York City funds the rest of New York State, and that's been like a huge argument on the part of the taxpayers of New York City. It's like, well, why should we carry the burden for the rest of the state? Go get a job. Well, there is no job in a lot of places. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be that way. It is designed that way. A successful small town in rural America has traditionally been agriculturally sustained. Farmers, farming, ranching, whatever it is. Milk production, soybeans, corn, sugar beets, all of these agricultural bounty. I mean, we have a productive earth, and you see, I kind of disagree with you about the notion and idea of overpopulation. There's this great National Geographic issue from March 1983, I'm pretty certain, that had two stunning articles in it. One was how the founding fathers of the United States and in the middle to late 1700s were taking lessons on government from the Haudenosaunee, which is the Five Nation Confederacy, or the Iroquois, or the
Democracy.
Native people here, and Jefferson, Hamilton, Franklin, all those main men were having Grand Council sessions. That is when the chiefs from all the nations in New York State would get to their Grand Council at Onondaga. And they would go and they would learn. Well, Haudenosaunee, you Native Americans here, really put up a stiff fight against the Dutch, the French, the English, and the colonial American army, and you're still here and you're still organized. And how did you succeed to continue governing yourselves in the face of this colonial pressure? What was your secret? How did you do it? Because you know what? We've got a battle with the boss there and King and King George, and we kind of need to know, how you did it, because we need to. So that's a lot of our the vote came from Native Americans, because they saw everybody had a voice. Even if it was a child might come up in the village meeting and go, but what if you answer this problem this way? They'd listen to it. They'd listen to everybody's input, and that's what we need in this country. We need to really listen to each other better. But there is the sinister side of things. Now Paula was out in the garden the other day, and she ran her camera up to the sky after taking some pictures in the garden. I haven't seen the clip yet, but Paula, if you want to just, here's the clip, June 19.
Okay, here it is, June 19th.
There's the Barton family garden. Wow. There's old potatoes along the path and a little cold frame there. Your landlord lets them do this.
So, Joe,
This is our chemtrail cloud. Look what they did to our nice clouds.
Yeah.
Ever since I was a little kid, I've never seen clouds do that. You know? Get over there where it's breaking up, too. You see how it's just dissolving?
And we were expecting rain.
Yeah. We were told it was going to rain, and then they chemtrailed, and look what they did. They broke up the cloud that would have been rain. Get over there, too. Look at...
Here, you hold it.
Yeah. Look how it dissolves the clouds. You see, they just completely dissolve away to nothing. And it was supposed to rain today. The weather was saying we were going to get heavy rain. And then they chemtrailed. And there went our rain clouds. Dissolved into nothingness. And here's how they're bigger clouds, and then look how they just dissipate into complete nothing.
Okay.
They're spraying us from the air like bugs, folks. You should all be outraged at this.
Boy, oh boy. Now, I've been on the geoengineering chemtrail trail since probably 1990, when I first learned about geoengineering and chemtrailing from my native friends, who out west in the Rocky Mountains and on the plains were probably really the first intensive experiment with heavy atmospheric aerosol injection. And it got so that by, say, 2004, here in the East, we were not really exposed to that kind of weather manipulation like had been going on out west, as my friends were telling me about. In fact, back in 1990, I didn't even believe it. I was like, nah, who would do that? You know, who would do that? And the reason, we got only 2 minutes.
But you go longer, just 2 minutes for the 58.
All right, so this particular conversation is going to we'll roll on going on live to continue it, but to wrap it up for now, there is a program that is grossly manipulating our environment that is also needs to be addressed, because we do really need to take care of people, and people are being replaced. And that's kind of what I wanted to share with you, is that technology and robotics and this thing called transhumanism. You're right. You know, I'm seeing that we as individuals aren't worth very much.
We're heavily involved with dehumanization and depopulation of unfit individuals. It's I call it passive euthanasia of American homeless people. You know, some others might look at it as a genocide. You know, there are people from very poor nations that don't do this to their own people. We are killing our own people. Can I just say one thing real quick?
Sure.
On Big Island, Hawaii, I did a study and reports for the government, and it turns out that on Big Island, Hawaii, 156,000 people live on 2% of the land. The government and 15 wealthy families own the rest. So now you have to wonder, why is the median cost of a house on Big Island, Hawaii in Kona $575,000? Because of the artificial inflation of the land underneath the building. And that's happening in every city in the United States. We have to redistribute our populations and redistribute the land to the people. That's what we need to do going into the 21st century. Well, we're in it, but we've got 44 cities that are on the ball thanks to 4 good mayors of 4 cities. The federal government doesn't care. The states don't care. They're not dealing with the problem of homelessness. Only the towns and the towns and the cities are dealing with the homeless situation. The states don't care. They don't have that problem. The federal government doesn't care. They don't have that problem. And no one's revolting, including the homeless. They're too beaten down, man. If they're genuinely homeless, they're not revolting. They're not marching on Washington.
They got to eat.
They're too weak. Yeah, they just want to live, man. They
just want to live.
Stay alive,
All right, so we're going to wind up this show and on a positive note is that these 4 cities are doing the good thing.
Yeah.
And thank you for watching Conant Show and Ken Churchill. I mean, please do come back. I mean, I think we really need to talk more about this topic. And we'll probably remain live for a few more minutes, folks, after this recorded. We're recording this segment so it can be rebroadcast on rotation. So thanks for watching Conant Show. Keep coming back. Thank you, Paula Gloria Barton, for teching, as always, making a seamless, lovely show.
Thank you, Gloria.
See you next week, everybody.
You want to chat till 8?
Yeah, we'll keep going. All right, but we're done recording, yeah? Okay, so
Want me to stop recording?
yeah, get your 50